Let's go now to the White House today, and on the heels of touring Hurricane Idalia damage in Florida, the president is calling on Congress to quickly boost funding for future natural disasters. And as we noted, he passed on the chance to criticize Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for not meeting with him in Florida on Saturday. NBC's Monica Alba joins me now from the White House with more on the president's trip. And as I welcome you, you're going to talk about the new NBC report about President Biden not punching back when it comes to Donald Trump. So take it away.
That's right, Alex. And you saw yesterday, typically with these major disaster visits, the president and wherever he's going, the leaders there try to put the politics aside to really deal with the matter at hand. And that is what President Biden thought was going to happen because of last year when he went to tour Hurricane Ian damage. He was greeted by then Governor Ron DeSantis. But the difference now, of course, is that DeSantis is also running for president to ideally, in his world, unseat President Biden. Right. So the stakes are a little bit different now. Governor DeSantis' team said that there was an issue with the logistics. The White House said they had informed the governor of their plans, but even so, they went forward and again tried not to put the emphasis on that. And instead, they were quite pleased, actually, with Republican Senator Rick Scott praising the president and what he's done so far in the hurricane aftermath. So that's a moment the White House will likely amplify and certainly appreciates. But it does come at a time of this political question of really what the president should be doing and how he should be spending a little bit of his time. For any incumbent, this is a challenge when you're trying to figure out how much time you're actually trying to do your day job as the president, but also as a candidate running for re-election. So when it comes to taking on the Republican frontrunner, of course, former President Trump, there are some questions in his political orbit about whether he should be doing more. And that's this great new reporting from my colleagues about this question. Within the White House, aides have kind of decided that they're going to wait until the springtime, until really primary season is in full effect, to take on more of an offensive tone and to go after Donald Trump more forcefully. But there are some wondering whether that is too late in the game. And so there are these other questions just about when he's going to do that. We know that sometimes when we ask the president here to weigh in on something related to his predecessor, he doesn't want to. And that's certainly because of a lot of the legal challenges that you were just talking about there with Ryan in terms of things that the Department of Justice is overseeing. This president never wants to seem like he is interfering or at all has any influence there. So instead, you have a lot of allies of the president, like Senator Tim Kaine, saying he should really just be focused on what he's been able to accomplish in terms of what they've branded now as Bidenomics and some of the other legislation. Take a listen to what the senator had to say about this morning.
Biden is building that ladder, trying to reorient our economy so that we don't focus on just folks at the top, but we build an economy that works bottom up, middle out. I think a lot of the evidence is pointing in a good direction. We have to do as Democrats something that we don't do so well, which is go out and sell the accomplishments, sell the infrastructure projects, sell the growth in manufacturing jobs. And if we do that, I think Joe Biden is going to get reelected.
And that's an acknowledgement of a part that has been challenging here, trying to get that message to break through. Polls show that a lot of Americans don't have a total sense of what some of this legislation does. So that's what you're going to see the president and his cabinet really focusing on in the coming months heading into 2024, of course. Alex.
Okay. Thank you for the heads up on all of that. Appreciate that.